Well, the title races in England, Germany, and France look like they're already over, but there are exciting title races in Italy and Spain. We're joined now by our two guys in Spain, Sam and Alex. Alex, I'm going to start with you first because you're in Madrid. All of these three teams, Real Madrid, Barcelona, and Atletico Madrid, have had wobbles. Atletico Madrid are having their little wobble right now, it would seem. Where are we at with this title race with these three teams, and how do you see it panning out?
Yeah, well, where we're at is 10 games to go. 10 games to go, and it's very much up for grabs. You're right, Atleti have had this little wobble. They lost that incredible game 4-2 to Barcelona before the break when they were 2-0 up. Before that, they lost to Getafe. But all three teams, as you say, have had their moments over the course of the season. The most dramatic kind of drop-off was probably Barcelona's back in November, December, when they went on a really kind of historically bad run, which is almost inexplicable because both before that and after that, they've been really good, the best team in Spain. Real Madrid have been a little bit more up and down. They haven't sort of had one sustained wobble, as you put it, but they've kind of had their just games they've dropped points in they shouldn't have against what you'd think of as lesser teams. Atletico Madrid at one point looked like the most sort of reliable candidate, but that's maybe not the case now. But to be honest, where are we? Look, we don't know. It's still open. Yes, Barca are in the driver's seat because they're top and they've got this game in hand that they're gonna play on Thursday as well. But there's not much in it. And like I say, with 10 games to go, any one of these three teams could still win the league.
Sam, obviously the game on Thursday. I think it's Thursday they play the Barca's game in hand. That is the big one, isn't it? If they win that and take that 3-point lead, that puts them in pole position. But I guess there's a bit of pressure on them to actually do it now, isn't it, to make sure that they get that win?
Yeah, this Thursday game's so huge, not just because, like you say, it's the game in hand, but because of the whole circumstances around this game being played. It was obviously called off at the start of March because the Barca first team doctor died in the hours before the game. So the game was rightly postponed. And now they've sort of shoehorned it into this Thursday on the back end of the international break. In all probability, Barca are going to have to play the game without Rafinha. He's playing sort of, Tuesday night, South American time, Wednesday morning, Spain time. So it's unlikely he's going to be back for that game on Thursday. There's been some sort of reports about him going on the bench, but pretty stupid with the flight back. So it takes on sort of an extra sentiment. If Barca then lose that game, you've obviously got all the controversy of, should it have been played? Should they play it without Rafinha, etc. and whatnot? If they win it, they're 7 points clear of Atletico. And I know Rob and Alex have touched on the fact that there have been some big turnarounds at the top of the table this season. Barca obviously chucking away a big lead. Real Madrid a decent lead at the end of January. But you would imagine with the games that are to go, 7 points, I can't see Barca dropping 7 more points given their form in 2025 than Atletico. So you're looking at it being really, really tough for Atletico if Barca win that game against Osasuna on Thursday. But yeah, it's just so huge because it's that game in hand. It gives them the advantage on Real Madrid. 3 points, which is possibly 4 points because they won 4-0 at the Bernabeu. So they could even sort of lose 3-0 to Real Madrid if they beat Osasuna and then match their other results and they'd still sort of finish ahead of them on head-to-head.
Sam, just on that, obviously we've heard Carlo Ancelotti complaining about playing so many games in 72 hours recently. Now I'm looking at the fixtures. Barca are due to play Sunday afternoon against Girona after playing on Thursday night. So first of all, they're playing in less than 72 hours between games. But also, have they not complained about having to play on a Thursday, which is basically still international break? Because like you say, a lot of players are less than 24 hours after playing in South America. So how is this happening? How are they playing such a big game, basically tagged onto the end of international break?
Yeah, so like I said, it was called off originally, and the slots to fit it back in, there aren't many spaces available. Barca are still in the Copa del Rey, they're still in the Champions League, which means there's just one spot, which is at the end of the season between the 37th and the 38th game, which is when Barca and Osasuna both said they were happy to play the game. The Federation, sort of a committee that the Federation have ruled that the game should be played on the Thursday. Barca and Osasuna both appealed that, and appeals committee, a judge at the appeals committee, if you will, ruled that no, this game has to be played on Thursday because more damaging to the sort of integrity of the competition would be having it played so late in the season when perhaps there's more on the line than playing it on a Thursday at the end of the international break when Barca are potentially without players, which sounds crazy when you say it out loud. I think there is precedent. Real Madrid played in between those final two fixtures at the end of the season against Celta Vigo a couple of years back. But they were ruled against and they have to play this game. And yeah, like you say, if they then do drop points with, players coming back late from internationals, players not available, it won't be the last we hear of it, I'm sure.
Alex, can I just add, Sam's just touched on it there about the competitions that the clubs are still involved in. Obviously, we saw Atletico go out of the Champions League in quite heartbreaking circumstances for them. Barca and Real Madrid are still in. Do you see that playing a part in this title race? I mean, in England, we would often look at it and say, well, the teams left in the Champions League might be distracted by the massive Champions League fixtures. Is that something that's being talked about in Spain? And do you think it's going to be a bit of a distraction for those two teams who are left in the competition?
I think you can look at it two ways. I mean, you can kind of frame it as a distraction, maybe, or you can look at it as a way of kind of maintaining momentum. Sometimes a team goes on a run, they've got that momentum with them in multiple competitions, winning games, and it kind of helps. It helps sort of keep them going, doesn't it? And Atletico, for example, as you say, out of the Champions League, we've got the Copa del Rey semi-final second legs next week, which is Real Madrid, Real Sociedad, Atletico, Barca. So Atleti potentially, let's say, for argument's sake, Atleti go out of the Cup. They've gone out of the Champions League. Yes, you can look at it and say, okay, that leads them to focus on the league, but it also might start to feel like they're sort of losing it and slipping away because, they're out of two competitions. They've only got one left. I think all of these three teams really have got the squads to cope with multiple competitions. Atletico's squad is very, very strong. So I think it depends how you look at it. I think you can sort of make the case both ways. I don't think it has to be a distraction. I think you can actually look at it as something positive as well.
Just on Atleti, are they still in? I mean, listen, obviously they're still in it, but are they still in it to the point where you actually think they're still in it? Or are you thinking if they're not careful, Athletic Club could catch them and take third?
I think that might be a step too far. I mean, look, you can't rule it out because, like I say, out of the Champions League, if they go out of the Cup, a bad result or two in the league, and suddenly it's like sort of the season's over. They let it go, and all of a sudden, they've got Athletic maybe breathing down their necks. But I think I can't see that. I'd be amazed if that happened. I think it is this top three is going to be at the top three at the end of the season. Are Atleti, outsiders right now, and you'd put it between Barca and Madrid to win it? Yeah, probably. I think so. But I think it would take looking at the fixture list, certainly Atletico's fixture list, their remaining games, they'll be the favourites in most, if not all, of their remaining games in the league. Now, that doesn't mean they're going to go and get 3 points in every game. Of course it doesn't. We've seen that through the course of this season. None of these three teams have done that. But you'd expect them to get enough points to finish at least third.
Sam, I know we mentioned earlier that there is a Clásico left, isn't there, in May? There is still a possibility of a Barcelona-Real Madrid Champions League final. I mean, it could be a kind of a rivalry and a season for the ages if all those things come together, particularly if the Clásico comes down to, or the title race comes down to the result of that Clásico in May.
Yeah, and not just that as well. We could be looking at a Clásico Copa del Rey final as well. We've obviously got the semi-finals next week. Barcelona and Atletico at 4, or Real Madrid with a lead against Real Sociedad playing at home. You'd expect them to be there, and then it's a case of you could be looking at a Clásico at the end of April in the Copa del Rey final, the LaLiga Clásico, and maybe we're jumping a little bit too far ahead. But like you say, with the way the draw is in the Champions League, it's not out of the question that those teams both reach that stage. It would be fascinating. It's sort of there's not the same sort of animosity that there was. If you think back to those famous 4 Clásicos that were fueled by sort of Mourinho and Guardiola, it's not quite there at the moment. But having 3 such huge games so close together would sort of test this sort of. I guess it's kind of obviously not a newer rivalry in terms of these clubs, but in terms of these players, this Madrid side with Mbappe, I guess there is a little bit there with a little bit of sort of rivalry there with Vinicius already, but then this young Barca side sort of looking to establish themselves. They've already beaten Madrid twice this season. It would be huge. And it's obviously the huge game when you look at those fixtures that are left, and one which Atletico will probably have an eye on as well, thinking if we can win all our games and get to there and then sort of see how that can feed into the last sort of 3 or 4 weeks of the season and give them half a chance. An Athletic Club as well could have a say, even if they can't catch Atletico Madrid. They do play Real Madrid, who they beat earlier in the season. They do play Barcelona on the last game of the season. They're also trying to get to the Europa League final, which is at San Mamés, which is huge for them. So even if they can't catch Atletico Madrid, they're one of those sides that could have a big say because they play against Madrid and Barca, and they're one of those sides that are capable of beating them.
Just a question for both of you. I'll ask Alex first, but there's so many superstar players in La Liga. Right now, which player do you think is the one most likely to decide this title race? Is it Lamine Yamal? Is it Lewandowski? Is it Rafinha? Is it Vinny Jr.? Is it Mbappe? Is it Bellingham? Do you know what I mean? There's so many superstars there.
Yeah, I mean, I'd say Rafinha's been the player of the season so far, ahead of the likes of Lamine Yamal, ahead of the likes of Pedri, who's been superb for Barca in midfield. So I think you'd probably go with Rafinha in terms of, but then also that Barca team, it does feel like a proper collective. It does feel like what Flick has built there is very much a team. And of course, the accusation, it's easy to level at this Real Madrid team, but there is some truth in it, is that they are more of a collection of individuals and less than a unit. In terms of one Real Madrid player, yeah, I think it is Mbappe. I think if he scores goals consistently, they're in with a chance. If he doesn't, it's more difficult. But no, for me, the player of the season so far is is Rafinha. If he continues to be decisive when he's back from the international break, not in time, of course, for Thursday's game, then it might be him.
Yeah, if you look at Barcelona's season, it's hard to argue that Rafinha's been their best player of the season. I certainly wouldn't argue against that. The goals he scored against Real Madrid in Clásicos, a hat-trick against Bayern Munich. In all the big games he's been there, I'd probably say he's probably closely followed in terms of Barca's best players of the season by Pedri. But going into this final stretch, and I've sort of said this all season as well, the player I look to, or you look to when Barca need a result is Lamine Yamal. He scored, deflected, but that late winner against Atletico Madrid. He has the great goal against Benfica in the Champions League. We saw earlier this week in the Nations League, he scored a good goal against Netherlands for Spain in extra time. He's the one player sort of when the chips are down, he's the one that can provide a spark against, a team that's sitting deep or whatnot. And he kind of thrives under this pressure. And I think in a title race and in the big games, I'd probably be looking to him as much, if not more than Rafinha.
So, can I just ask one on Barcelona? I mean, I know that they are one of the biggest clubs in the world, but is there any kind of surprise that they've got themselves in this position, to possibly win La Liga, to win the Champions League, given that, we read a lot and see a lot about their financial struggles, that they're up against a Real Madrid team who were able to add arguably the best player in the world in the summer in Kylian Mbappe, but they've had two massive wins over Real Madrid already this season. They're in a fantastic position in the league, also still in the Champions League. Has there been any kind of surprise, whether small or big, that they're in this position?
Yeah, it's absolute surprise at how well Hansi Flick has done. I think there was kind of, by the end, there was an acknowledgement that Xavi had perhaps ran his course, not necessarily as a coach, but just the way the environment and the sort of noise that comes out around the club made his position not quite untenable, but it was coming that way, and it sort of made sense to make that change. Otherwise, you're probably looking at, October, you've got sort of, like Manchester United had with Erik ten Hag, that sort of situation where you're having to make a break mid-season. So it was the right call to replace him. There were certainly doubts around Flick. He hadn't done a great job with Germany. His top level experience in club football obviously was great with that Bayern Munich team, but that was an 18-month spell that he had them playing really well. He'd done a lot of his career as an assistant coach. So yeah, they're surprised at how quickly he's managed to get this team up and running. I think pretty much every player in the Barcelona team has improved this season. They've stayed fitter when you look at Pedri not getting injured, etc., and the lack of sort of muscle injuries. The level that Rafinha has reached this season compared to his first two seasons. I think with other players like Pau Kubasi, Lamine Yamal, there was sort of an expectation that they would continue to improve. But yeah, it's absolutely surprised that going into final 6 weeks of the season, Barca have won the Super Cup, and they're in a position to win all three trophies. And now they would expect to win a trophy. I think at the start of the season, it wasn't so much. And, the players and people at the club would never say we didn't want to win a trophy, but what they were looking for was, an evolution, which they've had and they've seen. And now obviously the goals have changed. And now the expectation is that this team sort of, verifies and what they've done this season and goes on and wins something.
Just before we ask you both a prediction, which is obviously the worst question to ask anybody, you mentioned Athletic Club before the Europa League. Now, obviously, there's a big Premier League involvement in the Europa League. Man United and Tottenham are still in it. I think they're both the favourites to win it. Classic, parochial, English bookmakers saying the English teams are favourites to win it. Athletic Club play Rangers next. Just what sort of threat are they in the Europa League? And should we be seeing them as the favourites, considering obviously they play the final in Bilbao?
Yeah, they're a great team, aren't they? They're a great team. They're very, very... Look, talk about the impact that Flick's had at Barca. What Ernesto Valverde's done at Athletic, not for the first time there, is remarkable. And I would put them I don't know if they're the favourites to win it, but I don't know how much impact having the final at home has. But I'd say they're extremely, extremely strong contenders, because if you don't watch them in the Liga every week, they're a top team, really well organised, very talented players. Everyone knows about the Williams brothers, but there are other players there as well. And yeah, I think they're right there.
Yeah, this has been their motivation from the start of the season. Like Alex says, it's hard for us to perhaps gauge how much, having that home final does sort of give you that extra 1-2% or whatever when it comes to, these quarterfinals, semi-finals that they've got coming up now. But last summer when Barcelona wanted to sign Nico Williams, one of the big arguments that sort of Iñaki and the Athletic teammates said to Nico was like, look, stay, give us one more year. Let's get to the final. Let's win this Europa League at San Mamés. It'd be a historic achievement for the club. You just seen the celebrations they had last year after winning the Copa del Rey. That's what they want to do this year. Now go and win the Europa League at San Mamés. It's been something that they've been talking about since last summer, since they qualified for the Europa League, and knowing that the final was going to take place there. I think that does make them, for me, the most dangerous team left in the competition. Without, like you say, ruling out the English teams. Lazio have done really well as well in the competition so far.
So you're both backing Bilbao to win that, obviously. Sorry, Athletic Club. All right, La Liga. Is it going to be Barca, Real, or is it going to be Atleti? I'll ask you first, Alex. You've got two teams in the game, just about.
Well, at the start of the season, I said Real Madrid. It was a very basic prediction. They were champions, and they brought in Mbappe. But I think Barcelona now. I think that of course, the game in hand. Let's see what happens with that. But they're pretty clearly the best all round team. They had, as we discussed, that one big drop off, but they've been consistently excellent since, and they were before as well. I think Barcelona, they're more reliable, I think, than Madrid right now.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards Barcelona because they potentially got that advantage if they win the game in hand. And as I mentioned before, they've also got that head-to-head against Real Madrid where they can afford to sort of, finish level on points with Madrid as long as they don't get beat more than 4-0 by them and still win the league. So not only do they have a potential 3-point advantage, they also have the advantage if they finish level. I think all teams will drop points between now and the end of the season. There's going to be tricky spells between sort of, Copa del Rey games and Champions League games for all clubs. But yeah, I think Barca somewhere around sort of 55%, maybe Madrid at around 40% and 5% to Atletico.
And if it does come down to the Clásico, I mean, look what happened. As we mentioned in the Clásico so far this season, Barca won 4-0 and 5-2. I mean, so there'd be heavy favourites in that game if it does come down to that.
I've got a funny feeling we're getting this band together at the end of May for the Champions League final. But in the meantime, we'll leave you guys to it. Thanks again, guys.